Welcome back to the National Nightly News. Our headline tonight, a cautionary tale. Our reporter Jacob Webb looks at the satirical propaganda sim Not for Broadcast. Viewer discretion is most certainly advised. Developed by the British game studio Not Games, Not for Broadcast is one of the more unique games I have played in recent memory. Put simply, it's a stressful micromanagement game set in the 1980s where you play the role of a newly appointed news broadcaster called Alex Winston during the rise of the new political party Advance, and their leaders Julia Salisbury and Peter Clement. In essence, you dictate the news within reason, alongside popular news anchor Jeremy Donaldson, his co-anchor Megan Wolfe, and sound engineer Jenny. Before I delve too deep into the story of Not for Broadcast, it's best I explain how the game is played. The first thing you will notice about Not for Broadcast is that a lot of the game is played through blended live action sequences, or as it's better known, full motion video. This is a technique more synonymous with games hailing from the early 90s, most notably Night Trap, that blends interactions between a mouse input and live action video. In fact, as of writing this video, Not for Broadcast holds the Guinness World Record for the game with the most full motion video, clocking in at 42 hours and 57 minutes. The live action sequences will take place in front of you on a series of 5 screens. The large screen to your right indicates the broadcast that is going out to the viewers at home, and the 4 screens to your left are all of the possible cameras you can pan to. But it isn't that easy. Beneath each of the screen displays are 3 lights, red, amber and green. These represent how acceptable it is to pan to each camera, green obviously suggesting that this camera is best, often in cases of a close-up or a reaction, amber indicating that it's fine but probably not the best choice, and red indicating that you should absolutely not be switching to this camera. Displaying the wrong camera shot for too long can cause you to drop viewers quite quickly, earning yourself a fast track to the employment center. These color indicators will change based on the situation presented on the camera at the time. For good viewing, you want to keep away from the red and try to stay on the green wherever possible. It's also advisable to switch cameras frequently, as staying on the same shot can make the viewership drop. On top of this, there are other mechanics in the form of interference.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Hello? Okay, I think it's resolved itself. As I was saying, there's a mechanic in the form of interference, where you'll have to carefully navigate the antenna out of any conflicting signals to keep your broadcast running smoothly. Once again, failing to keep the interference out leads to a massive drop in viewership, though there are exceptions, which I'll come to later. Here's the thing with live broadcasts, they don't always go to plan, and that's where your next mechanic comes into play, the censor button. I shouldn't really need to explain this one, but I guess I will anyway. If some absolute bastard decides they want to start f***ing swearing like a little bitch, then you simply press this bloody button every time you see the sound wave turn f***ing red. Failure to bleep out any crass language also negatively harms your viewing figures, but make sure you don't bleep anything that isn't red, otherwise this will have the same effect. After all, no one wants to listen to when they're watching the news now, do they? The final thing I'll talk about for now is the ability to load and run ads between each sequence of the broadcast. These influence the popularity of the various in-game companies, which can become important later and change different elements of events within the story, particularly if you choose to play certain tapes we'll talk about later. There are more mechanics to talk about of course, but I'll save them for when they come up within the actual story itself. The main way I would describe Not for Broadcast is a series of surreal sequences of ridiculous or slapstick British humour, acting as an exaggerated parody of news programmes in the early 80s, standing at similar levels of ridiculousness as cult classic shows like Brass Eye. However, between these sequences there is a dark dystopia forming, slowly but surely in the midst of these events. This ability to switch the tone of the game from something of a comedy to that of a serious drama, especially in the later chapters of the game, presents a remarkably interesting and engaging narrative. While the gameplay is passable, this is an interactive drama at its core. Back to the story, and it's revealed that Advance has won the national election and will be making a speech later in the night. Advance announces a controversial new policy to tax the rich in the Wealth and Assets Act, as Prime Minister Peter Clement announces,
"You're gonna pay up, you're gonna pay back."
This comes as a shock to many, but particularly Jeremy Donaldson, who remarks,
"That is outrageous, whoever and whatever they are.
And on that note, you've successfully completed your first broadcast as you head home to your partner Sam and your two children Charlie and Susie. This is the second style that the game takes, a text-based decision-making branch that I should emphasize will actually have some pretty significant consequences later in the story, from decisions that seem not only insignificant at the time, but almost seem as if the game wants you to pick them, so think really carefully before blindly choosing an answer. Skipping forward a week and it's a review of Advance's first week in office. Are they successful? Well, that's up for you to decide, as the headline mechanic allows you to choose the public's perception towards the events going on in the world, which will be reflected in the way Jeremy Donaldson and Megan Wolfe report about such events. This doesn't just extend to purely Advance, but many other smaller side stories within the game that you have complete control over the direction they take across the many broadcasts that you manage. This week, you'll be broadcasting a dual interview between economist Katie Brightman and the conspiracy theorist Alan James. Alan is actually one of my favourite characters because of his over-the-top nature being very funny to me, and his ad you have the choice to play at the end of the broadcast is also extremely entertaining.
I'm Alan James. This is not a movie. This is not some child's tale. This is not a dream. This is reality. This is the story of you and how you're stupid and asleep. They're going to take your poor sweet grandma and you're never going to see those dribbling dentures again. Oh, grandma, look at their faces. That's not what cows look like. Alan James is right in front of you.
Alan James.
I'm Alan James.
Alan James.
Alan James is right.
Alan James.
I'm Alan James.
Coming to a city near you.
In the interview, Katie acts as the voice of wisdom, suggesting all the things that Advance can bring to the country. On the other hand, Alan is spouting various nonsense, like,
"We're to become the great herd, ignorant, sterile, and short-lived. That's what they want. War is inevitable."
Thank you, but that isn't
And this will not be a war like we've ever seen before. We're talking millions of deaths. We're talking high-tech weapons that can level entire cities. We're talking...
Out of the wrong orifices?
Mock me all you like, Jeremy, but when they murder your parents and they poison your food and they take you away to their camps for hypno-brainwashing, we'll be laughing then.
That might be a great way to sell books, Alan, but you know full well that isn't going to happen in a democracy.
Democracy is dead.
Following this, Jeremy conducts a series of at-home interviews with other members of the public, which go about as well as you can expect an at-home interview to go.
I'm leaving, Greg. Oh, Tony?
Hey, let's believe that!
Tony, I mean, we're literally away for 2 seconds. How does this happen, Tony?
The final broadcast of the night features one of my favourite mechanics of the game, and this is the musical section. Megan Wolfe interviews Jeff Algebra and the schoolchildren of Scritchforth College, recent beneficiaries of the Wealth and Assets Act, and their theatrical play, Hey Friendship. What makes these sections so brilliant is the comically terrible acting and the typical British comedy that comes with it.
Maths is for losers.
What?
Maths is for losers.
My arm's stuck, coach.
Keep going for
Right, maths is for losers. What do you mean not today? Who are you? Oh, my arm's free, coach.
Brilliant, keep going.
Right, who are you to stand up to me? I, Gary the Fist.
However, the actual music behind it is often really quite good and improves in quality with each episode, with some personal favourites being performances from Jesus,
So don't make a fuss when you find you're one of us. Yeah, every single one of you's a bit Jesus.
Heat Rash, and the Novaries.
In our tiny flat, we built a peaceful habitat. Now our lives are we're having a baby.
I'm going to leave you to mainly explore the musical section yourself, as I feel like it's something that doesn't really deserve to be spoiled all that much. But in regards to how the musical sections of the game actually work, it's quite simple but can be a little tricky. Basically, you'll want to change the camera angle within the beat of the song that's playing. Doing this consecutively well means that you will receive a multiplier of up to a maximum of 8. Ideally, you want to keep this multiplier up as high as possible throughout the section for good viewing figures. The first few songs will start off pretty simplistic, even for me who has quote-unquote a severe lack of rhythm. However, it becomes a lot more challenging to keep up a combo on the later songs in the game. The next broadcast rolls around and it seems that a protest group branding themselves as Disrupt have begun to make themselves known. What this could mean for the future is yet to be seen. But you can choose whether you want to present this new group as a thuggish mob or a movement for change, changing how the world around you views this organisation. The next segment introduces you to our field reporter, Patrick Bannon, who's covering the invigorating Sports Board Championship, where the rules for the sport are... Hang on a minute, what actually are the rules for this game? Who cares? I know everyone wins, and that's enough for me.
And the winner of the first annual Sports Board Championship is everyone!
Okay, the ref has decreed once again a win for everyone, including me as my 15th win in the Sports Board Championship.
Before the end of the broadcast, it's over to an interview with Prime Minister Julia Salisbury and Peter Clement to discuss their latest plans for the country, the transition centres. But there's a problem with the rain, causing the equipment to become electrified. Be willing to take a couple shocks in order to keep the broadcast running smoothly, at least as smoothly as the broadcast can run. As it seems while Advance are explaining the concept of a transition centre, giving the elderly the ability to unburden their loved ones by choosing the right to die. Wait, that sounds an awful lot like...
No, it doesn't. This is transition. Completely different.
Anyway, as I was saying, the equipment issues don't just extend to your equipment, but also the newsroom, as Advance's interview is cut short when Peter Clement takes one too many shocks in a genuinely amusing sequence.
Look, I am perfectly capable. Oh, my grandmother with a rusty.
So please watch your language.
Colourfully put there. He's not the only one to take too many shocks, as by the end of the broadcast you take a nasty shock yourself and pass out. When you wake up, the world has been overtaken by a mysterious global event forcing everyone to stay in their homes. Of course, I'm clearly talking about the Mrs. Snugglehug bears escaping and terrorising the world. I mean, what else would it be, right? As a result, all the news is conducted at home. In reality, the team at Not Games were particularly affected by the UK lockdown in 2020 and had to adapt on the fly, which I believe deserves credit in itself, as not only did they develop this extra lockdown special, but also another special unrelated to the main story called The Telethon, which I highly recommend you also check out. So, where does the invasion of the Snugglehug bears fit into this story? Well, this episode directly follows as a dream sequence, following the electric shock from earlier, introducing the new mechanic of the radio tower, and sending a shock of your own to those fluffy bastards. Overall, this chapter of the story is actually very clever, because although in many cases a dream sequence can seem like a cop-out, in this instance it works quite nicely to allow a chance to directly speak to the player about their decisions so far, with adverts that directly speak to you based on the decision you've made, such as feeding into your fears about your family or Advance's true agenda in a way that simply wouldn't have been possible without this originally unintended sequence that, if anything, adds a lot more depth to the story.
Advance go-getters. We can't believe you fell for it.
After being attacked by a series of Snugglehug's toys, you wake up back in the present, months later. Must have been quite the nasty shock. While you've been in your comatose state, disruptors began to grow in size and support. Not only that, but the UK is beginning to face economic and resource sanctions by the World Council, but Advance are adamant that as a country, we can survive by ourselves. Meanwhile, Jeremy interviews rising star Jesus, who's performing his new song, Paint It Red. But this time, you've been given some new instructions by management, as not only will you be asked to censor any of the red swear words, but also any language that Advance would disapprove of in a new blue waveform that appears. Ultimately, it is your decision whether you decide to censor Jesus' song. Regardless though, Jeremy will find out about this attempt, and he will make this statement.
Jesus there with his new song. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. I'm sorry. I may not agree with you, but I'd just like to offer you an apology. I've just been told that there was some kind of issue upstairs and an attempt was made to censor some of your lyrics.
What? Are you joking?
I'd just like to say to you and everyone at home that this was a mistake.
This is absolutely ridiculous. I cannot believe this.
Here at the National Nightly News, we pride ourselves on remaining neutral, unbiased, and independent of any outside interference. You have my word. We will never censor ideas. Back to you, Megan.
It's during the broadcast at Heatwave that things really begin to intensify, and one of the very early detrimental decisions is made in the story. As the title suggests, this broadcast is set in summer. As a result, all of the equipment is prone to overheating and shorting. So you'll have to use your trusty desk fan to keep the power unit from shorting by directing it towards each of the valves of the power unit. On top of that, due to technical faults, the fan will occasionally turn off, making your job even harder than it already is. And it seems like you're not the only one struggling with the weather, as Jeremy's frustration with the weather and the subsequent events in the world is beginning to peak. The final straw comes when the community cohesion officer assaults one of Jeremy's guests, and Jeremy grabs his gun, holding the entire studio at ransom. This is arguably actor Paul Baverstock's best scene, and is a perfect example of how Not for Broadcast seamlessly tone shifts from comedy to drama. After taking the gun, Jeremy attempts to speak about what is occurring in secret at the heart of Advance. Jeremy pleads you in the broadcast room to show a tape from the organisation Disrupt, stating,
"We're going to show the other side for a bit of balance."
Again, it's ultimately your decision whether you show the tape, but either way, it will have consequences. If you do decide to show the tape, a shadowy figure will address the viewer, highlighting all the issues with the organisation, that Advance are, and their policies.
Why should you trust us? Another faceless organisation. A shadowy figure with a distorted voice. You've seen it so many times in the movies. Well, this is not a movie.
My name is Alan James. I used to try and shock people for a living, for entertainment. But now we live in a time where perhaps you need to be shocked. Perhaps we need to wake up. Advance are coming for our freedoms. They are coming for the fruits of our labours. They will take our wealth. They will euthanize our parents and smiling throughout. They will turn our children against us if we voice our concerns. But you don't have to accept it. A great many people already won't. You can resist. You can disrupt.
After the shocking reveal of Alan James being the leader of Disrupt, Jeremy holds the CCO and Jenny for an interview at gunpoint regarding the state of the country and the direction it is heading.
We are sleepwalking our way into oppression, and the news isn't saying anything. We're not saying anything. What are all those scientists working on at Grantham Downs? What are they testing underground at Altergrave?
Though expresses regret that Jenny was caught up in the event, noting,
"It was supposed to be your day off."
Upon realising that Alan James is the leader, Jeremy begins to lose all hope.
We are all a freak with a paddle made of Alan James. Christ, it's also pointless.
With armed security quickly making their way up to the room, Jeremy realises there truly is no escape, placing a gun to his head, while Jenny begs you to cut to the ads. Once again, whether you choose to show Jeremy's final stand to the world is up to you, but remember, it will have a deep impact on the direction that the story takes. After the events of that night, there is a significant time skip, and when you return, it's the 20th week of war with the World Council. A war-torn Britain is presented. Nonetheless, Advance are holding a conference later in the broadcast. Perhaps they will represent the glimmer of hope the country needs. We hear about Jeremy's current status based on the decisions you took, and receive broadcast hacks from Disrupt and Alan James that we can choose to be supportive towards or reject. We're eased into a new mechanic using the sound effect booth during an interview with singer Lil C, a clear parody of singers such as Britney Spears, teaching us the ropes of what sound effects to play, where, and introducing us to her new song, which is totally about being under siege and nothing else. Finally, it's over to the notice board, the comedy performance where you'll be using most of your newly learned skills with the soundboard to make sure the jokes land. It's looking like this is a pretty normal broadcast so far, at least compared to your last broadcasts. So don't worry about this one too much and just have a good time. Hello? Can you hear me? I'm not sure what just happened. A huge explosion was just heard. Apparently Advance are about to make an announcement. I'm just gonna play it now.
Good evening, citizens and leaders of the world. Minutes ago, operatives working for Advance detonated nuclear explosives simultaneously in 4 major cities across the continent. We have similar devices in 58 other urban centers, and will not hesitate to detonate them if our conditions are not met in full and without delay. The people of our territory will no longer tolerate your illegal and genocidal blockade. You are to remove it immediately. We will accept nothing less than your unconditional surrender. Your territories will be taken under our control. We will install replacement governments to ensure that your citizens become part of the new future. Your borders are now our borders.
I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if you are receiving this, but if you are, then you have to know. You have to know what's being done right now to our neighbours. This is unprecedented. Our government has committed multiple acts of mass destruction in our name.
Shot.
Nor do I care how you voted. You didn't vote for this. None of us did. This can't be. We are waiting further news and, what if they respond?
We will expect your complete acceptance of our terms by midnight tonight. Thank you.
Oh my god, what the fuck? Following the end of the war, there's another significant time skip. The countries that weren't destroyed by the nuclear bombs have surrendered to the UK and become one of many new territories of advance. Their various regimes and policies have become practically law. The team membership card has become an ID card and a legal requirement, and the further expansion of Betterment, a rehabilitation facility for those that don't fit into Advance's ideals, and transition centres have all become mandatory, as well as Advance provided menu centres to feed those in the country during rationing. We hear on the news that Disrupt have conducted an attack on a convoy carrying various political prisoners, of which many have been rescued. Their location is currently unknown. You look to your left and discover that a walkie-talkie has been left on your desk. Alan James explains that he needs your help to bring Advance down, in which you can either cooperate with him or ignore him. If you choose to cooperate, Alan will notify you when he needs your aid. In the meantime, it's time to head over to Patrick Bannon as we're mourning the tragic death of Peter Clement for a memorial ceremony.
So that old bitch lying through her teeth.
Patrick.
I don't know what I'm going to do.
We're live.
Because I'm not being funny. Things were better with Peter, weren't they?
Patrick.
They were, and I don't mind saying it. They were, because he held her back. But now there's no stopping her.
Hello, Patrick, we're
Of
live.
course, can't say that, can I, Francis? No, not with public ownership. No, with public ownership, you can't say anything these days.
There.
Oh, she's lost it, mate. She's completely off the rocker. I heard from an aide that... Hello, Megan, you join me here live from the what? Oh.
We'll give him a couple seconds. Ah, Patrick. Well, Patrick is here to hand us over to Julia Salisbury for the ceremony.
It is my great honour to give to you the Peter Clement Memorial Garden. Should we see if we can get a countdown going? Everyone with me? 10, 9, 8, 7. I give you an order, you will damn well follow it, do you understand? Centipedes are requested. Target approaching Songbird.
More than 10 million people! Justice demands a response! Lower your
Oh my god, this is what Alan James and Disrupt are planning, a mass attack on Advance, and now he's requesting that you help Disrupt by painting the protesters in a less negative light? This is all too much, but this is only the beginning. As Alan enlists your help to broadcast a coded message to Disrupt agents for one final siege on Advance and Channel 1. The actions you take on this night, later known as Liberation Night in the story, dictate the fate that Alan and Disrupt meet, as well as the later fate of Advance. That's all I'm going to talk about for the story. I don't want to spoil the final few episodes. I will let you discover your own path through the final chapters of this game. But be aware, there are multiple endings of the game, all unique in their own right, based on major decisions you make throughout the game. Whether you choose to support the Advance regime or support the Disrupt Revolution, remember one thing: the road to hell is paved with good intentions.